Yeah, g'day everyone. My name's David Selwood. I'd like to welcome you to my presentation today on recovery strategies for elite athletes. I've made this presentation up to educate my clients on various strategies to use for their recovery days, as they are extremely important to their programming. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a presentation that will roughly last for about 30 minutes. And if you have any questions at the end of it, feel free to send me an email or a text message. And I'll endeavour to get back to you as soon as I can. So what we're looking at is a rest day, and basically the reasons we do this is restocking glycogen stores, which is obviously the fuel in your body, building strength, minimizing fatigue, and reducing risk of overuse injuries, which is more of the physical side of things. And then we look at avoiding mental burnout, which is a mental side of thing. Overall, this helps your body repair itself and better increases your performance over your program. So what we're going to cover today is two different things. The first is a bit of an education session, I know it's fun, on the types of fatigue, and then the second one is recovery types and strategies that we're going to implement from these types of fatigue, and when we're going to use this in our program. So the first type is fluid and fuel, the second one is physical therapy, and the third one is psychological skills, which we will touch on a bit later. Awesome. I was pretty impressed with that little transition there in the presentation. I think that looked pretty cool and creative myself. But basically what we're going to go into now is the types of fatigue. So this is going to be a bit of an educational session, mainly looking at the limiters that prevents us from training at a higher level and at a higher intensity every time we go out and do it. Awesome. So basically there are four types of fatigue. The first is metabolic fatigue, which is looking at the energy stores in your body. So basically what we're looking at here is how much energy do you have readily available. So we're looking at fat, we're looking at glycogen stores. Think of your body like a car, and your fuel gauge is your fatigue. The lower the number, the more fatigued you're going to be. So if you're very close to being empty with your fuel in your body, then you won't be able to go out there and train as hard. Whereas if you're full, so if your fuel gauge is higher and it's on the full side, more than likely you're going to be able to go out there and do a higher quality session. The second thing we look at is neural fatigue. This is the force production. So if you think of, obviously, if you're riding a bike, you get more tired as you get longer into the session. Even if you've been keeping up with your food, everything like that, you're always going to be more fatigued as you go through. This is basically because your body, from a electrical point of view, can't keep up with that electrical stimuli as you go through it. This is also a problem as you get into the further into it, as the drive and the motivation can die off as well. That brings us into more of the psychological fatigue. So we're looking at emotional and social stress. So how much negative energy is floating around, things that are preventing you from actually going out there and giving everything you've got. And then environmental fatigue. So do you train in a very cold climate, in a hot climate? Do you travel a lot for training? Do you have to go to competitions where you have to drive, an hour and a half, 2 hours away? Those sort of things. Awesome. So this brings us to the three main areas for recovery. These three areas are nutrition and fuel, physical therapy, and also psychological skills. Nutrition and fluid and fuel is extremely important in limiting the amount of fatigue that we have in our body when we do go out for a session. We need as much energy as we can, as much fluid as we can in our body, so that we don't dehydrate, etc. I really recommend everyone go out and see a dietitian for their training. It's very personalised. They'll have a chat to you about the right things. They'll recommend the right sort of diet for you, all those sort of things that are going to help increase your performance, but also help your recovery for your training. Basically, loss of fluid is the first thing we're going to look at, and basically there's been heaps and heaps and heaps of studies over the last 50 years about fluid and how our body works. Everyone knows that we need fluid to live. A loss of only 3% of fluid equals a 5% performance reduction. So that is huge. If you are slightly dehydrated, if you're thirsty, if you feel thirsty at all, you're usually about that 5% performance reduction already. So it's extremely important to make sure you hydrate between sessions. Uh, Even going a bit further, a loss of 5% of fluid equals a 30% performance reduction. So if you don't get onto that 3% straight away and you do let it progress, you're not coming back from that. So your performance is going to severely reduce, which means you won't be able to give as much to your training sessions. With the fuel side of things, you basically burn fuel like a car burns fuel, and we had a chat about that earlier. This means that if you don't have fuel in your body, that you can't move, and that's obvious. So if you don't have anything to burn, you're not going to be able to move, because energy is like a fire. If a fire will die down if you don't put wood in it. So starting a session without fuel is going to limit your performance. It's extremely, extremely important to make sure that on your days off that you make sure you're eating right, that you're gonna, because it's obviously in a block form, so if you're gonna have a rest day, you know that the next couple of days are going to be pretty intense. So it's really important to make sure you get that food in your body so that there is enough fuel to get through the next couple of days of training. Okay, so the next thing we're looking at really is the three various ways that you can help your body in terms of fluid and fuel. First is hydration, the second is your energy stores, the third is your building blocks. So we're going to go to the top and we're going to cover hydration firstly. This includes things like water, which can involve electrolytes, sports drink and soft drink. All are very important. You do hear obviously a lot of people complaining about soft drink, which obviously you're going to do if you're looking to lose weight and do things like that. Soft drink is obviously full of sugar. It's the same as sports drinks, full of sugar. If you're an elite athlete and you've just done a high intensity session and you've burned through all your glycogen in your body, what you need is you need energy. You need you need glucose, you need glycogen, you need sugar in your body. So you've got about a 30 to 45-minute window, depending on the research study. But yeah, you've got about that long to get as much of that carbohydrate in your body as you can, so that it stores in your muscles as energy. It's ready to go. Even though it is a fast-burning fuel, it'll store in there pretty quickly. So basically try and get that in as much as you can. As you're going through to more of your rest day though and you haven't trained, it's probably not so important to have the soft drink and the sports drink. Probably more important to drink your water with your electrolytes, because you're not burning that sugar as much. So that's when you start to look at more of your energy stores. So that's when you go down to your next thing and you look at your carbohydrates and your fats from your food. So when we're looking at this, we're looking at things like pasta and rice. We're looking at your different fats. It's really important to have a good combination of both of these. If you don't have one and you have more than the other, the body isn't used to it. There's no point changing things now. Over the years, our bodies become adapted to the types of foods that we've been eating, etc., etc. There's new diets and new things that are coming out all the time that suggest that our body should be becoming more adaptive to burning fat as our main energy source, like we did previously. And there is, some research out there to say that it is beneficial. However, I don't think it is too important to be changing that now. Our body again has adapted over the years to involve things like carbohydrates. So please don't jump onto fads. Don't listen to the new, fangled Men's Health, all that sort of stuff that goes on. It's all those magazine articles are designed to do is designed to get you to buy their articles, get you to buy their magazines. If they have the same thing in there every week, you're not going to buy it, so they have to change things up. What you're better off doing is going out there and speaking to a dietitian, to a degree a nutritionist, but more so a dietitian if you can, having a chat about a personalised program, having a chat about the sort of fuels that you should be putting into your body. Have a chat, send me an email or a text. I can put you onto a really good one, and they'll be able to work through a sort of a diet that'll help you perform at your best. Building blocks. So building blocks are things like proteins, amino acids. This is basically the rehabilitation, the recovery side of things. Protein is not an energy source. Protein is only a ways to bridge a gap between damaged muscles. So this is how you recover and get better. Protein is really important in the production of muscle fibers. It's really important in recovery and and the rest days that you're going to have. So make sure that you get protein in your diet. I don't care if this is red meat. I don't care if you do have to go out and get a supplement such as a whey protein or something like that. There's heaps out there. Please just try to avoid going out there and spending a lot of money on these or big tubs of protein that say they're going to do one thing and do another differently to someone else. If you go out there and get a gold standard whey protein, which is on that picture on the bottom right hand of the screen, that's a really cheap, really effective way of getting the protein in the body. Awesome. So we've arrived at my favourite part of the presentation. I've always been really interested in physical therapy. That's why I've done, what I've done with uni and into my postgrad stuff. But physical therapy is a very important rehabilitation, very important recovery way to make sure that we can get the most out of our program. With physical therapy, we're mainly looking at the soreness in our muscles. We're looking at how much production of force we can generate, all those sort of physiological things that are involved with the movement of our body and all those sort of things. Basically, we're going to look at a few different factors. First thing we're going to look at is warm down and stretching. Obviously, since the dawn of time, we've heard about this. Stretching is very, 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 very important and seldom used with training. But I think it's probably something that we talk about, but we never do. And I think a lot of you guys will agree with me there. I don't write it in with your programs because I'm sort of just expecting that you're doing it. Probably most of you aren't though. So what we're going to do is touch on it a bit here. With your stretching, it's most beneficial straight after your workout. So you're going to do sort of a slight warm down, which a warm down can be defined as slowing the heart rate down and slowing the intensity down of your training. So if you've just come off maybe a base run, running 4:45s for let's say 10 or 15 kilometers, what you're going to do is probably about a kilometer where you're going to bring that pace from 4:45 up to about 6 minutes and slowly into a walk. What this does is it just slows the body down. It slows everything down slowly, so you're not going straight off that faster intensity and straight into nothing. So it just gives your body that chance to slow itself down. What we then do is we go straight into our stretching. This is really important because our muscles have been fatigued. We've just been obviously stretching and we've been doing a lot of things as we're in training, but we haven't actually gone through and statically stretched. So when we talk about static stretches, we talk about just going down and doing everything without moving. So you can see in the pictures here, we've got that young female that's doing a nice glute stretch there, working that on the ground. We've got old mate there on the right. He's doing a bit more of a hamstring stretch, and then down the bottom side you can see the young female that's doing 5 different stretches there as well. Really important to stretch the active muscles during a session. So I don't think personally it's too important to do more of sort of a shoulder stretch or anything like that if you've just done a run. Maybe if you have enough time you can do that, but if you're someone like me that just likes to get a session done, do maybe 2 or 3 minutes of stretching, I think it's really important to do those 2 or 3 minutes of stretching with the muscles that you've been fatiguing the most. So work on the bigger muscle groups such as your glutes, such as your hamstrings, your quads, your calves that you've just done with your running, as opposed to the minimal sort of movement that you've been doing in your upper body. This is important straight after your session, but also really important to do this on a recovery day as well. So if you want to do this 3 times through the day, you've only got to spend 5, 10, 15 minutes doing it. Just go through and just do every muscle group in your body and do it as well as you can. So if you're doing that hamstring stretch, you can see that the fella on the far right there's got his leg pulled back now, but it's straight up and down. Slowly over time, try and bring that hamstring back. So set yourselves little goals. Try and become more flexible as you go through your program as well. Ice baths and hot and cold showers. So one of the ideas with the ice bath, that cold therapy, was actually created by one of the professors at CSU in Bathurst, who thought that theory up. Now, it's a really beneficial way to sort of freeze your muscles a little bit, and it sucks to be honest, but it's a really good way to rehabilitate. Problem is, not everyone has this ability to be able to just jump in an ice bath when they finish. So unless you're sort of like a very elite athlete who has the ability to throw heaps and heaps of ice into a wheelie bin or into a bath, then you're probably not going to be able to utilize this strategy. For this reason, an alternative is the method below that you can see with the red and blue pictures there, which is basically alternating hot and cold showers. It's an effective way to flush flush all the impurities out of your skin, out of your muscles, or the lactic acid after you've done a workout. So what you basically do is you alternate between hot and cold showers. So maybe 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off. It is very hard to do, to be honest, to be motivated to be able to get this done. But just know that if you do a hot and cold shower, your training session the day after will improve could be by as much as 5 or 10%. So this sort of thing will help. So that's another thing to look at with physical therapy. Active recovery sessions. So things like light spinning, easy spinning, yoga and stretching. We've all heard it before. I think yoga is one of the most underutilized things that we can possibly do with our program. It's funny, like I talk to a lot of triathletes, a lot of age groupers who, go home after a session and they sit on a couch and watch TV. That's great. As opposed to that, why not get the family out and teach everyone how to do yoga? Like teach your kids how to stretch, teach the family how to do it, get everyone involved. It's a really good family activity, but it's also a great way for you to just recover after a session, just to chill out, stretch your muscles, you get your core happening, all those sort of things. So an active recovery session is really, really important. You can do this on your day off, go and do a yoga session, maybe at the gym, do some light stretching, easy spinning on a bike, get the bike out and just spin for maybe 5 or 10 minutes. You don't have to have a goal in mind with it, just get on the bike and 5 or 10 minutes of spinning, or even some light swimming. You don't even have to move your arms, just get in the water, run up and down the lanes a couple of times. All those things help with your rehabilitation, but more so with your recovery on your days off. Compression. So this is something I'm not going to touch on too much in terms of the physical aspects of it during training, because I don't believe it helps too much in your actual training sessions. There's still not much in terms of, well, there's actually no evidence to suggest that it actually helps with performance in your training session. However, what we have found though is that it is huge in recovery. So there's a lot of evidence out there to suggest that recovery techniques with compression is very, very beneficial to your training sessions the next day. I'm not going to touch too much on the research of that, but you can probably look it up yourselves a little bit, or send me an email. I can send you some links. But as you can see with this bloke in the top, he's got it's obviously base layer with his top. He's got his legs going on. Female on the far left, she's got, well, it's the brand Arena, but she's a swimmer. She's done a workout. She's got that straight on. And then this bloke here on the far right, this horse, something that they use a lot nowadays with their horses is they get compression on them straight away on their race horses, and it helps with their recovery, so they can put a session in the day after that's going to help them. Massage. So we all know the benefits of massage. Deep tissue, foam rolling, trigger point. I'm going to work backwards. So trigger point is using like a hockey ball or something like that to roll the muscles out. It used to be used a fair bit years and years ago, and then it was stopped for a little while, and then now people are starting to bring it in a little bit more. There's actual brands now you can go out and buy, but yeah, I find well, you start with a lighter ball, so you get a tennis ball out and roll the muscles out with that, and then as you get more used to a tennis ball, you can go out and buy a harder and harder ball to roll the muscles out. That'll make it a little bit easier. Foam rolling, again, a very new concept, so something that I love to do at least twice a day. It just rolls all your muscles out properly. It's a great way to, well, a really cheap way actually of massaging your body, but a really good way to teach yourself self-discipline as well, because it can be quite painful. The main things to avoid there is rolling over any joints or bony structures. But if you go through over your glutes, your ITBs, your hamstrings, all those sort of areas, then that can really help you training the day after. Sleep, this is huge, massive. We all need sleep. The body performs better when we get more sleep. The top of the screen, you can see a bit of data. This is basically well, the reason I've put this in there is because nowadays you can track your sleep, and it's really cool, because when I sort of started getting into the sport, 15 years ago with triathlon, we had no idea how much sleep we were getting. Nowadays, with the data that you can pull out there, you can see, obviously it's an estimation based off how much movement in your wrist when you've got a watch on, but you can see how much you're moving during the night. You can see maybe when you're waking up the most. You can get a really good idea of how much sleep you're getting. But it's really important that on those days off that you get as much sleep as you can. You're not training, so why not go and have a 30-minute power nap in the morning before work, or sleep in a little bit, or even have a lunchtime sleep, whatever works for you, but get as much of that in as you can. And then the last thing, our rest days. So it's part of the program. Rest day is massive. We need these. Please always put your rest day in first when you're writing your program out. If you need to put a session in on your rest day, make it a very light recovery session. If there's too much training, tell me. You shouldn't be doing that much training. You should always have at least one rest day. Remember, muscles are torn in the gym. Also, torn, whatever sort of sport you're doing, they're always tearing. That's how we get better, is little strenuations of tearing. They're fed in the kitchen and built in bed, so those things are pretty important to remember, that you're always, when you're training, you're fatiguing your muscles, and then all you're doing is you're able to go and get your protein into your body to recover, and then you're building on that when you're having your sleep and your recovery time. Psychological skills are pretty much the most underutilized, underrated part of any recovery, any rehabilitation, any sort of program at all. Psychological skills are so important to utilize during a day off, a recovery day, to just help with your positive attitude and everything that revolves around the program that you've got coming up. Um, there's 9 things that I've really established as being important to these skills that we'll go through now. The first thing is a positive attitude. So choosing a positive attitude is extremely important, and it's something that I'll always have. I'll never, after working in gyms and sort of looking at all these sort of things in textbooks and talking to people and everything like that, it's so important to have a positive attitude. As soon as you become negative, you just drop off so quickly. You need to have a positive attitude to everything you do. So attitude is a choice. You're not born with a different attitude. You define yourself by having the attitude that you do. So you don't go out there and be negative. What you do is you choose to be positive. Choose to let things go. Choose to accept. So compete against yourself is the first point I'd like to make. Don't go out there and try and beat everyone else. Don't try and look at what they're doing. Don't look at the guys that are playing rugby better than you, that are doing this differently. Just think about what you've got to do. Think about competing against the best times that you can, because a lot of the time what will happen is, if you do your program properly, your PB will be the winning time anyway. So just think about that. Pursue excellence, not perfection. It's so important to not go for that 100%. A lot of the time, what people do is they're never happy with how they end up. They're never happy with even if they do a personal best by 10 minutes, or even if they beat their goal by a minute or two, they're never happy with how their program went, how they ended up at the end result. Just think about the excellence. Pursue the excellence, not the perfection. We're never going to have a perfect race where every single thing goes according to plan. There's always going to be one or two little things that we're going to think about. Pursue the excellence. Think about what went right. Accept coaches, teammates, and officials is not perfect. Growing up in the rugby for so long, I've sat in a grandstand. I've listened to the supporters. I've listened to the coaches. I've listened to referees, teammates, everyone. What I always find is there's always someone that's going to be negative. Someone's going to be shouting something out that's wrong, shouting something out you don't like. The referee will give a penalty for something that you don't think was meant to happen. The coach might say something that you don't agree with. Teammates might drop the ball. Just accept that this is going to be part of the sport that you have. If you dwell on the fact that this happens in the now, that someone will drop the ball and it's let the team down, all that's going to happen is you're just going to have a negative attitude, and this is going to bring down your performance in the sport. So what's really important is on your recovery days that you think about the things that went wrong, but accept that happened, and how now are you going to move on from it. So what that brings me to next is how we maintain balance between sport and the rest of our life, which is really important in these rest and recovery days. It's not only a day that you spend thinking about yourself and about the performance that you've done, a positive attitude towards your family on that day. So bringing maybe yoga, like we talked about before, into your training session. Maintaining the sport and the rest of your life is so important. So bring that attitude to the rest of your life, and when that's happy, everything else will be happy as well. So maintaining self-motivation, this is something that, being a former gym manager, I used to see a lot of the time as a very negative thing in the gym, and it's something we used to work a lot on, trying to keep people motivated. The most unfortunate thing about it is a lot of people just don't have the self-motivation to keep going. So a very important skill to have in the rest and recovery days, and to try and develop is this self-motivation, how to maintain it, how to keep it going. So one of the things you can look at is knowing the rewards and benefits are going to come. They're going to happen. They might not happen now, but they are going to happen. And being able to persist through the difficult times, and even when the rewards are not short term, knowing that it'll happen. In September, you've got a race. It's June now. You've got 4 or 5 months to put in, some good hard work. And if you do that, if you keep that motivation going through those months, and when you do get to September and you look back, you'll know that you've put in the best possible thing that you can do. So again, knowing that the benefits come from the participation, not the outcome. So when you look back at it, if you nearly listen to every single Olympic medalist that's ever talked, they don't necessarily talk about the day. They always talk about what went on to get there. They always talk about all the hard work they put in, the journey they've gone through, all those sort of things. This is extremely important to remember, that the benefits come from the participation, not the outcome. So getting the gold medal at the end of the day is awesome, but pushing through that session in the rain when it was 5 degrees outside, and you just felt like going home and sitting in the warm living room on the couch watching TV, but knowing that you went out and did that session, that's the things that you'll look back on at the end of the day. So being self-motivated to keep pushing through those tough times, knowing that the journey is more important than the outcome, is something to look at as well. Goal setting is another thing that probably people take for granted a fair bit. Goal setting is something that if you do properly, then you will always succeed. Get realistic long and short-term goals and set them properly. Set them for times that are effective, that you know that you'll struggle. If you think about winter and you think about times in the past where you've struggled to get through winter time, then set short-term goals during that time. So every week, maybe look at, if you're a weightlifter, look at lifting 5 kilos heavier every week for winter, or if you're a triathlete, look at swimming a base pace 5 seconds faster for 1,000 meters, or even bringing your SWOLF score down. Things like that are really important. Being aware of your current performance levels is really important as well, because what you need to do is you need to know that where you're going to be in the long term is not where you currently are. So if you're aware of your performance levels now, and you know that you're going to get better in the future, then that'll help motivate you. Committing to the demands of training plans, so that's something as well. Where goal setting can come into your recovery and your rest days is you can sit down with a pen and paper on a day that you'd normally be out there, maybe doing some sprint training for rugby or whatever, and you can sit down and you can goal set. So write down the things that you want to do in the next block of training coming up. this is probably one of the biggest things that I see that affects people with their training, and it's so unfortunate because um, human race, we've developed ourselves to a point where we listen to everyone else more than we listen to ourselves. We dwell on the negatives because other people bring us down. What is extremely important is that we deal with people effectively. So we're part of a larger system. So we've got family, we've got friends, we've got teammates, coaches, we've got heaps of people around us. What we need to do is learn how to effectively deal with all these people, how to communicate thoughts and feelings with these people and listen to them too. One thing I always see is athletes go into a race and they talk themselves out, but usually it's because someone else has talked to them before and might have brought something into it negatively. Know the people that you need to talk to the days before a race. Know the people you need to talk to in your recovery days. People that are going to keep you positive, keep you on track. Learn how to, chat to these people. Learn how to develop a network of family and friends and your teammates, and talk to coaches, and how to sort of network with these people so that you get the best out of yourself. Communicating thoughts and feelings with athletes is great. One thing you always got to remember is you need to let them talk as well. So listen to them as well. And what happens is when you listen to each other, you might pick up on something that you didn't know about with your training. The big one though is knowing how to deal with conflict and negative people. In your recovery days, I want everyone to write down, and you don't have to show me, but write down things that you, and maybe even names or initials of people that bring you down, and things you don't like that they say. Write those down, and next to those points, write down how you're gonna effectively deal with those people next time you talk to them. There's nothing worse than, and it happens in every sport, in nearly every way of life, every workplace, how to deal with negative people, because there's so many people around that do it. But the conflict, how to maybe not push away the negative people, maybe how to coax them into being more positive. So maybe you could send this to them. Maybe you could be more positive around those people so that they thrive off that off that positive energy, and then want to implement that into their own program. But just, yeah, it's something that I see a lot of the time. So be effective with the people that you talk to. Use positive self-talk. So again, dealing with people effectively is important, but also dealing with yourself is something that you've really got to persist with as well. Positive self-talk can be little cues. Everyone's heard Jens Voigt in the obviously in the Tour de France. He used to use the term "shut up legs." It was a cue that he used whenever he was really tired. He was on the front of the peloton, and he knew he had to keep pushing, but his legs were trying to tell him not to. Have something in your head that you like to use. Write it down. A little pep up. It could be something similar to keep consistent. Keep consistent. That you tell yourself all the time. I think I can. I think I can. Those things is really important. But have something that you can always relate back to when you're not feeling great, when you're tired. That you push through to the next level. So maintaining confidence during difficult times with self-talk is so important. So you'll be maybe 14 kilometers into a 15-kilometer run, and your body will be telling you need to slow down because you're so tired, and you'll have to tell yourself, no, I'm not. What are you going to say to yourself? You need to have something that's going to be positive, that's going to tell you can keep going, and just get through that session. Talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. So everyone sort of uses their best friend as someone that they know they can trust, they can be honest with, that they can talk to, and usually get a really good response back. Talk to yourself like you would talk to your best friend. So in your head, don't say negative things that'll bring you down, because your best friend won't tell you those. They won't tell you can't do it. They'll tell you can. So tell yourself you can. Use yourself as a best friend. On your recovery days, go through and not so much have a chat in your head about it, but think about positive things that's going to keep you going. And use self-talk to regulate performance in competition as well, which is similar to what we talked about to start with. Oops, sorry guys, I sort of skipped back a bit there. But using positive mental imagery. So imagine yourself doing the activity the best possible way. So if you're, say, a swimmer, you're not going to think of yourself swimming through the water like like a freight train. You're going to want to think about how to swim the 100 free with a nice easy arm, how to put the arm in the water, how to glide through the water. It's really important that you imagine yourself doing the activity the best possible way you can, because there's so much research out there nowadays that suggests that this psychological skill actually does help your skills in the sport. There was actually a research article I read, it would have been a couple of years ago now. I forget who it was by, but what it was a bit of talk about a tennis player who was injured and couldn't actually play the sport and couldn't actually do the skills. But every day in his head, he just thought about the actual movement of the serve, of continually, and it was the one thing that he kept in control of. So if you can control the skill in your head, then you normally will be able to control the skill when you get back to your training as well. Be detailed and specific and realistic with your mental images. So try and think of, how's the crowd in the background? How is the cold ground underneath your feet? What do you hear? What do you see? What can you touch? What can you smell? Be as in the moment as you possibly can in your head, and try and be positive. Try and be really positive with what you're thinking about when you're there as well. So it's important to accept anxiety as part of sport. Anxiety is always going to be there. I see it a lot, for an example, in recovery days when people think that they should be out there doing a training session because they're losing fitness by sitting around. Accept anxiety as part of your sport. So you're always going to be anxious. You just need to accept it. There's some degree of anxiety to help performance. So if you're a sprinter, you want to be as pepped up as you can, as explosive as you can. So anxiety is going to help. If you're a rugby fullback and someone's put a kick up into the air and you've got to catch that ball without dropping it, and you need to be really calm and controlled, you don't want a lot of anxiety there. So what that does is that brings us to the next point, which is knowing how to reduce the anxiety when it becomes too strong. So if you're an Ironman before a race and you're about to do the swim leg and you haven't got in the water, but there's 10 minutes to go, how are you going to reduce that anxiety so you don't use up too much negative energy effectively? So what you can do is you can have a cue. Okay, if I get to this certain anxiety level, then I'm going to go and do a run on the spot, which will help me deal with that. And practice that on your recovery days as well. What are you going to do when you're anxious? What are you going to do? What cues have you got in mind? So emotions are part of sport. You're always going to be excited when you do well. You're going to be angry when you don't do well, and disappointed when you don't hit a goal. There's always going to be emotions in sport, and you've just got to learn to accept them. So let's say you're not hitting your goals with a particular time in your 100-meter sprint. That's going to happen. You've got to learn to accept it. What are you going to do to change that is what you need to look at. It's the same with a race. If you've done a race and you've done a minute quicker in the 500-meter rowing, what are you going to do to help build that excitement, to help maintain that for the longest period of time you can? What cues have you got in mind to help that excitement each time? You're gonna write down in a diary that it was a great session. You felt great after it. You couldn't believe that you'd done a minute quicker. Is that going to help it when you reread that the night or the day after? Will that help that excitement grow? Similarly, what are you going to do if you're angry? If you drop a ball in rugby and it's 5 minutes to go and you've just let the team down because that's the game lost. What are you going to do to overcome that anger? Are you going to go into your shell? You need to learn those cues on your days off. So you need to go through and think about what you're going to do when you get to that angry point and how you're going to overcome that. So learning how to manage that emotion effectively. And again, that goes into that point there where you use emotions to improve rather than let them interfere. Okay, so maintaining concentration. So pay attention to each training session. There's nothing more, I think, frustrating for myself, because I know I do it all the time, than when I go into a run and say, okay, I'm going to run 4.5 minute kilometers for 20 kilometers, and I'm going to do that with a cadence of 170 beats, strokes per minute. There's nothing worse than when you go into that spot where you start daydreaming and thinking of something else, and you drop off in your pace and your cadence goes down, and everything goes wrong. What you need to do is learn how to maintain that concentration before it gets to that point. So how are you going to maintain a concentration? Are you going to make a playlist that when a particular song comes on when you're running, are you going to use that song to get you back into here and now, just to keep you going with what you're doing? You need to learn how to maintain that concentration in your recovery. It's a great time to do it on your recovery day when you're sitting around probably not doing too much. You know, how are you going to maintain that concentration in the here and now? So trying to resist distractions is another one. So uh, you know, if you've got something coming up, let's say someone wants to go out for lunch, what distractions are there? Okay, I've got a run I've got to do today. I want to go to lunch with this person. You need to know the focus and how to deal with the distractions from that point of view. It might not be the fact that that's an actual distraction going to lunch. It just means that going to lunch might mean that you have to do a session earlier in the morning, so you might have to get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. You need to maintain that focus and resist using it as an excuse. So it's probably not a great example, but another really good one might be to, if you're sitting around the house, to resist wanting to go and eat, um, say a piece of pizza, because you know that you can't have an extra 200 calories in your diet for the day because you're over already. You need to maintain that focus. So how are you going to resist eating that bit of pizza? Have you got a cue in your head that you've developed that's going to tell you that that pizza is not what you need? Um, you need to maintain that focus. The other important thing is regaining that focus when concentration is lost. So we touched on that run that I said I did. I'm trying to run 4.5 minute Ks, keep the cadence over 170. When I did drop off, what did I use to regain that focus? So we talked about that song in your playlist. That's a really good example of it. If we go back to the example of the pizza, what are you going to regain? What are you going to do to regain your focus when you've lost that concentration? So when you've gone, okay, I've already eaten two, bites of this pizza. What cue are you going to use to say it tastes good, but you don't need it that much? So you need to, develop that as well. Awesome, guys. So we've touched on those three types of recovery in our training. The most important thing I think overall is to remain in a stress-free environment on your day off. To just enjoy for what it is. You've trained hard during the week. You've done all the hard work. Remain stress-free. So just chill, enjoy your day, relax. Again, rest days. We touched on this at the start. Restock glycogen stores, build strength, minimize fatigue, reduce risk of overuse injuries, avoid mental burnout, and help your body repair itself. If you apply what we've learned in this presentation to your training and your rest days, then you're going to see a massive improvement to your performance, your improvement in your program, and that's obviously going to translate to a big improvement at the end when you're doing your actual performance in your race or your sport or whatever you're training for. So just remember that a rest day is very important, and don't waste them. So rest days are important. Don't waste them. They're there for a reason. Stretch, do yoga, spend time with family, eat, drink. Use them to your advantage. Don't just sit there on the couch and do nothing. Remain stress free. Just go through your cues. Learn how to deal with people. Write down your goals. There's so much you can do on a rest day, and a lot of people get so anxious, which we touched on before, about not training on that day. Yes, you're not training, and you're not probably fatiguing your body like you've been doing all week, but there's so much that you can do on that rest day from your training that can improve you astronomically in your program. So thanks everyone for listening to this presentation. It did go a little bit longer than I thought it would, but if you do have any questions at all, please send me an email, a Facebook message, a text message, or just give me a buzz, and I'll be able to help you out as best as I can. Have a great day. See ya.